There's a moment in sports when something so absurd happens that you have to ask yourself if you're living in a simulation. A moment so disconnected from logic, from basic business sense, from anything resembling rational decision-making that you genuinely can't believe the people responsible are being paid to make these calls. That moment arrived on January 8, 2025, when news broke that the WNBA Players Association had officially blocked licensing companies from using Sophie Cunningham's pointing gesture, ruling it too derogatory to monetize. Not a vulgar celebration, not a threatening gesture, not anything remotely controversial by any reasonable standard. A point. A single, confident, personality-driven point that fans had fallen in love with during the 2024 season, and the organization that's supposed to be fighting for player earnings killed it before it could make anyone a single dollar. This is the story of how the WNBA, at the peak of its popularity, looked a gift horse directly in the mouth and chose chaos over common sense. The 2024 WNBA season was unlike anything the league had experienced in years. Caitlin Clark's arrival shifted the entire cultural conversation around women's basketball, drawing casual sports fans who had never paid attention to the league before. Viewership numbers climbed, ticket sales surged. The WNBA was finally having its moment, and within that wave of momentum, something organic and genuine emerged from an unexpected source. Sophie Cunningham, the Phoenix Mercury guard known for her physical play and unapologetic competitiveness, developed a signature gesture that resonated with fans on a completely different level. During games, in moments of confidence and competitive fire, she'd point. It sounds simple because it was simple, and that simplicity is exactly what made it work. The pointing gesture spread across social media the way only truly authentic moments do. Nobody manufactured it, no marketing team engineered it, no PR consultant advised her to develop a signature move for brand building purposes. It just happened, the way the best sports moments always do, and fans responded immediately. The clips circulated, the reaction videos piled up, and Sophie Cunningham went from being a well-respected role player to one of the most talked-about personalities in the entire league. That kind of organic viral momentum is worth more than any planned marketing campaign because it can't be faked. Fans know the difference between a genuine personality and a constructed one, and Sophie's pointing gesture was as genuine as it gets. But the moment that truly captured the scale of what Sophie had built came not in an arena, not on social media, but at her own basketball camp. Young players had come to learn the game, to improve their skills, to spend time with a professional athlete they admired. And when it came time for photos, every single camper wanted the same thing. Not an autograph, not a standard smile for the camera moment. They wanted to recreate the point with Sophie. Kids who had watched those clips, who had seen that confidence and swagger, wanted to embody it themselves. They wanted to feel what Sophie felt in those moments. Think about what that means from a pure marketing perspective. These weren't just fans, these were the next generation of WNBA supporters connecting emotionally with a player's authentic personality in a way that would keep them invested in the league for years. That's not just good marketing, that's the foundation of a sustainable fan base. Companies noticed. Licensing conversations began, merchandise concepts were developed. Sophie Cunningham's pointing gesture was on its way to becoming one of those iconic sports moments that gets printed on t-shirts, turned into foam fingers, and commemorated in the kind of products that keep a player's name alive long after any individual game fades from memory. The pipeline was moving, the business was happening, and then it all stopped. When a story this strange drops, the first question anyone asks is whether the source can be trusted. In an era of sports social media where anonymous accounts manufacture controversy for engagement, credibility matters enormously. So when Darren Rovell reported on January 8, 2025 that the WNBA Players Association was blocking Sophie Cunningham's pointing gesture by labeling it derogatory to monetize, the sports world paid attention, specifically because of who Darren Rovell is. This isn't some faceless account posting inflammatory claims from behind a profile picture of a sports logo. Rovell has spent years building one of the most respected track records in sports business journalism. He founded CLCT Media, a company focused on collectibles and sports business that has developed serious credibility within the industry.
Before that, he spent years at ESPN covering the business side of sports at the highest levels. He has cultivated sources inside team front offices, league headquarters, and major corporate partnerships across the NBA, NFL, MLB, MLS, and beyond. His following of 1.8 million didn't accumulate because Darren Rovell posts hot takes. It accumulated because when Darren Rovell says something happened, it happened.
When people initially reacted to his report with disbelief, Rovell didn't back down. He didn't soften the claim or hedge with language about unconfirmed rumors. He doubled down and provided specifics. He stated clearly that he had spoken directly with someone at a major company who physically showed him the official rejection documentation from the WNBA Players Association. This wasn't a whisper campaign. This wasn't second-hand information passed through multiple anonymous sources. Someone with a legitimate business interest in licensing Sophie's gesture received an official rejection letter, and Rovell saw it. The business deal wasn't theoretical, it was in progress. Companies had done their research, identified consumer demand, determined that Sophie's pointing gesture was marketable, and were ready to move forward. The Players Association stopped it before it could generate a single dollar. That detail matters more than almost anything else in this story, because it means this wasn't a preemptive decision made in the abstract about whether something could theoretically be offensive. It was a direct response to actual business interest. Companies wanted to pay money to use Sophie Cunningham's image and gesture to create products that fans clearly wanted to buy, and the organization representing Sophie Cunningham's professional interests said no. Let's sit with that word for a moment. Derogatory. The WNBA Players Association looked at Sophie Cunningham pointing during a game and decided that gesture was derogatory enough to block from official licensing. It's worth examining what that word actually means and what it's typically applied to before we assess whether it has any business being used here. Derogatory language, derogatory gestures, derogatory behavior, these are things that demean, degrade, or disrespect someone in a way that goes beyond normal competitive expression. A slur is derogatory. A deliberately humiliating taunt targeting someone's identity is derogatory. A gesture designed to mock someone's disability, background, or personal characteristics is derogatory. These distinctions exist for good reason, and sports leagues across the board have policies against genuinely derogatory behavior because it crosses a clear line between competitive edge and personal disrespect. Sophie Cunningham pointed during a game. She pointed with the energy of someone who was locked in, competing hard, and feeling herself in the moment. The exact type of expression that makes sports worth watching. The context of that moment wasn't malicious. There was no intent to humiliate. There was no targeting of someone's identity or personal characteristics. There was a basketball player in a basketball game expressing herself the way athletes have expressed themselves since the beginning of competitive sports. The idea that this gesture falls anywhere near the category of derogatory by any reasonable definition requires a level of interpretive gymnastics that most people simply aren't willing to perform. For comparison, consider what the WNBA's official social media accounts have posted without incident. Physical altercations between players, flagrant fouls, hard defensive plays that crossed lines, moments of genuine on-court aggression that drew no official censorship and weren't deemed derogatory by the same organization now troubled by a point. The double standard isn't subtle, it's glaring. And when you notice it, a very specific question starts forming that nobody in an official capacity seems willing to answer directly. Here's where things get genuinely uncomfortable, and it's worth being direct about what's being discussed in sports circles, because dancing around it doesn't serve anyone. Sophie Cunningham is white. The player she pointed at during the moment that went viral is black. And according to widespread speculation among fans, analysts, and commentators who've been following this story closely, there's a real possibility that the racial dynamics of that specific interaction are the actual reason the WNBA Players Association labeled the gesture derogatory.
It's important to be clear about what this is and what it isn't. This is speculation. This is what's being discussed, what fans are theorizing, what commentators are raising as a question. The WNBA Players Association has not confirmed that racial optics drove this decision. No official statement has explicitly said the gesture was banned because a white player pointed at a black player. But the question is being raised loudly and for reasons that aren't hard to understand. Because if you remove the racial element from this equation entirely, the decision to label a pointing gesture derogatory becomes almost impossible to explain through any other lens. Players point at each other in basketball constantly. It happens in pickup games, in college games, in NBA games, in international competition. Nobody films a pointing moment between two white players or two black players and starts a conversation about whether it's derogatory. The gesture itself carries no inherent negative meaning. What seems to be driving the controversy, at least according to the speculation circulating in sports media, is who was pointing and who was being pointed at. If that's truly what happened here, if the Players Association made a business decision based on the skin colors of the people involved, rather than the actual content or intent of the gesture, then what we're looking at isn't a policy decision. It's something far more troubling about how the league filters normal competitive moments through a racial lens that turns them into controversies they were never meant to be. Sophie Cunningham played basketball with personality and confidence. She pointed during a competitive game the same way hundreds of players have done before her without incident. The scrutiny she's facing, if the speculation is accurate, has nothing to do with what she actually did and everything to do with what she looks like while doing it. And whatever side of any political debate you land on, building a professional sports league around that kind of filtering isn't a path to growth. It's a path to exactly the kind of constant, exhausting controversy that drives casual fans away.
Strip away all the social commentary for a moment and just look at the business math, because the numbers tell a story that's impossible to defend regardless of anyone's political or social views. The WNBA has never turned a profit. The league operates on subsidies from the NBA, supported by a parent organization that has essentially been bankrolling women's professional basketball for decades while waiting for the revenue model to become self-sustaining. The 2024 season offered the most promising signs yet that the financial picture might finally be shifting. Viewership records, increased attendance, major media attention, corporate partners actively paying attention to the league in ways they hadn't before, and right in the middle of that momentum, with companies actively pursuing licensing deals for WNBA-related products, the Players Association blocked one of the league's most marketable, organic moments from generating any revenue. Let that sink in fully. Businesses had done the research. They'd identified consumer demand. They'd determined that Sophie Cunningham's pointing gesture was something fans wanted to buy products featuring. They were ready to write checks, create products, and put the league's brand in front of consumers in a way that would have generated direct revenue for Sophie herself and indirect visibility for the league as a whole. The Players Association rejected it. The ripple effects extend beyond just the lost licensing fees. When companies approach any sports league about licensing deals and get rejected over something this puzzling, it sends a message about what working with that league looks like. It signals unpredictability. It suggests that the organizational decision-making process doesn't prioritize business growth or partner relationships. Corporate partners want certainty. They want to know that when they identify an opportunity, pursue it through proper channels, and come to the table ready to invest, they'll be dealing with an organization that understands how business works. Getting an official rejection letter explaining that a pointing gesture is derogatory does not inspire confidence in the next partnership conversation. Meanwhile, fans who wanted Sophie Cunningham pointing merchandise didn't stop wanting it just because the official version was blocked. They went to Etsy.
They sought out unofficial, unlicensed products from independent sellers who had no obligation to pay licensing fees to anyone. The consumer demand that companies had correctly identified didn't disappear. It just redirected away from channels that would have benefited Sophie or the league and toward an unofficial market that benefits neither. The WNBA could have been collecting royalties on every single one of those sales. Instead, they get nothing, while independent sellers profit from the organic popularity of one of their players. That's not a principled stand against something offensive. That's leaving money on the table while calling it a policy. To understand why this pointing gesture story hit such a nerve, you have to understand the pattern it fits into. Because this isn't a one-time stumble. It's the latest chapter in what has become a consistently frustrating narrative for people who genuinely want to see the WNBA succeed as a professional sports league. The 2024 season should have been an unambiguous celebration. The numbers were there, the attention was there, the cultural momentum was real and significant, and yet almost every week brought a new self-inflicted controversy that overshadowed the basketball itself. Caitlin Clark arrived as the most anticipated rookie in the league's history, bringing millions of new fans with her, and she was physically targeted on court in ways that drew minimal official response. The Kennedy Carter body check became a flashpoint, not because the league handled it poorly, though the initial response was deeply confused, but because players and media figures rushed to defend what was clearly a dangerous play, rather than simply condemning it and moving forward. The conversation around that incident alienated exactly the casual sports fans the league needs to retain if the 2024 momentum is going to mean anything long-term. Angel Reese, one of the league's most prominent young stars, spent significant portions of the season complaining publicly about media coverage, despite receiving an enormous amount of attention by any objective measure. The complaints weren't entirely without basis. The media landscape around the WNBA is genuinely complicated, but the dominant narrative of grievance rather than celebration made it harder for new fans to simply enjoy the basketball without feeling like they were walking into an ongoing argument. Multiple situations throughout the season that could have been handled quietly and professionally instead became extended public controversies because the people in positions of leadership within the league consistently chose the path that generated more conflict rather than less. The pointing gesture ban is the perfect symbol of all of this because it captures every problematic tendency in a single absurd decision. Take something positive, take something fans genuinely connected with, that created real commercial opportunity, that represented exactly the kind of authentic player personality that professional sports leagues are built on, and then find a reason, however tortured, however disconnected from any reasonable interpretation, to kill it. The league can't get out of its own way. That phrase became a running theme among sports commentators throughout 2024, and the pointing gesture story is why it keeps coming up.
The truly maddening thing about the WNBA's handling of Sophie Cunningham's moment is that every major professional sports league has already worked through exactly this question and arrived at the same answer. Player personality sells. Authentic expressions of individual character are the building blocks of fan connection. Memorable gestures become merchandise. Memorable merchandise keeps players' names alive. Keeping players' names alive builds lasting fan relationships that sustain leagues through generational transitions. This is not complicated. This is sports marketing 101, and every league that figured it out has the revenue numbers to prove it works. Steph Curry's night-night celebration became one of the most recognizable gestures in basketball. Kids across the country started doing it on playgrounds. Merchandise featuring it flew off shelves. The NBA didn't sit down and debate whether someone might find it derogatory if analyzed through the right interpretive framework. They embraced it because fans loved it, and fans loving things is the point of professional sports. LeBron James's chalk toss before games became an iconic pre-game ritual that merchandise departments had a field day with. Again, nobody convened a committee to determine whether it could theoretically be offensive to someone, somewhere, under some circumstances. They put it on t-shirts and let fans buy them.
The NFL spent years trying to suppress touchdown celebrations, believing that excessive celebration was bad for the game's image. They eventually reversed course entirely after realizing that fans loved the celebrations and that penalizing them was making the product worse rather than better. Now the league actively encourages players to develop signature celebrations, understanding that those moments of personality are part of what makes the sport entertaining. Even the NHL, historically the most conservative of the major North American professional sports leagues, has loosened its approach to player expression significantly because the data is overwhelming. Personality drives engagement. Engagement drives viewership. Viewership drives revenue. Every link in that chain is straightforward. The WNBA is moving in the opposite direction at the exact moment it needs to be moving fastest in the right one. While every comparable league has learned to embrace the authentic moments that make players memorable, the WNBA Players Association is finding reasons to shut those moments down before they can generate the commercial activity that would financially benefit their own members. It's not just bad business strategy, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what professional sports fans are actually looking for when they choose to invest their attention and their money in a professional league. At the center of all of this is a person who did everything right. Sophie Cunningham played hard, played with personality, and created something genuine that resonated with fans in a way that can't be manufactured. She ran a basketball camp where young players idolized her. She was accessible and authentic on social media. She represented the WNBA in exactly the way a professional league should want its players to represent it, as a real human being with a distinct identity that fans could connect with on an emotional level. And her own union, the organization that exists specifically to advocate for her professional and financial interests, took one of her best opportunities to profit from that authenticity and blocked it. The Players Association exists to maximize member earnings, protect member rights, and ensure that players have the best possible working conditions and commercial opportunities during their professional careers. WNBA careers are short. The earning window is narrow. Every season, every viral moment, every licensing deal represents real money for players whose professional lifespans are fundamentally limited in ways that make these opportunities time-sensitive and genuinely significant. When Sophie Cunningham's pointing gesture went viral, that was her moment. That was a window for her to translate authentic fan connection into financial benefit during the exact period when she's actively competing and at peak marketability. Her own union closed that window, not because Sophie did anything wrong, not because the gesture was actually offensive by any honest standard, but because someone within the Players Association's decision-making structure decided that the racial optics of the specific moment mattered more than Sophie's financial interests, more than the business interests of the league itself, and more than the preferences of the fans who had actually made the gesture popular in the first place. That's not representation. That's a union prioritizing its own political and social preferences over the concrete financial well-being of one of its members. And the fact that this decision could be made without any apparent accountability or public explanation says something deeply concerning about how power operates within the WNBA Players Association. If the roles were reversed, if a black player had created a viral gesture that fans loved and merchandise companies were lining up to license, and the Players Association blocked it on vague grounds that it was derogatory, the response would be swift and devastating. The inconsistency of the standard, if the speculation about racial motivation is accurate, isn't just unfair to Sophie Cunningham personally. It represents a fundamental corruption of what a players' union is supposed to stand for. Unions exist to ensure equal treatment and equal opportunity for all members. What actually happened here is the opposite of that. There's a reason this story struck such a nerve beyond just the immediate absurdity of a pointing gesture being deemed derogatory. It's because it crystallizes something frustrated WNBA observers have been trying to articulate throughout an entire season of self-inflicted wounds. The league has a cultural problem that goes deeper than any individual decision or any specific controversy. There's a framework operating within WNBA leadership and the Players Association that consistently prioritizes ideological consistency over business growth, grievance over celebration, and internal political considerations over the interests of the fans and the financial health of the league itself. That framework produces moments like this one, where something genuinely positive, a viral gesture that kids love, that companies want to license, that represents a player's authentic personality, gets run through a filter that finds a reason to shut it down. Where the question being asked isn't, how do we maximize the value of this moment for everyone involved, but could anyone possibly find a reason to object to this? And in a framework where the second question always takes precedence over the first, almost everything eventually becomes problematic. Almost every authentic expression of personality can be interpreted as potentially offensive by someone under some analytical framework. The end result is exactly what we're seeing. A league with its most marketable organic moment in years, blocked from commercializing it by its own Players Association. The 2025 season brings a new media rights deal with significantly increased revenue. The structural foundation is improving. The league has an opportunity to build on everything positive that happened in 2024 and convert a moment of cultural attention into something lasting and sustainable. But none of that structural improvement matters if the same decision-making patterns that have defined WNBA leadership continue to operate. The pointing gesture story is a small thing on the surface, a licensing dispute over a single gesture from a single player, but it reveals something large about the instincts and priorities of the people running women's professional basketball in America. And until those instincts change, every peak of momentum will be followed by another self-inflicted valley. Every opportunity for growth will be accompanied by a decision that undercuts it. And the question of whether the WNBA can sustain the attention it earned in 2024 remains genuinely, frustratingly unanswered. Sophie Cunningham pointed. Fans loved it. Kids wanted to recreate it. Companies wanted to sell it. And somewhere in the WNBA Players Association, someone decided that wasn't allowed. That's the whole story. And somehow, it tells you almost everything you need to know.